Hello, and welcome to episode 16 of Trails in the Pod. I'm Colin. That's Kevin.
Colin, inflation's hitting hard working Americans very hard. Money's tight all around. You don't make much as a grad student. I make a decent amount as a financial administrator, but it could be more. So today, we're going to be two broke guys talking about gender dynamics.
If anybody would like to sponsor this discussion in the next 5 minutes, please let us know. We will gladly read out any Harry's Razors ads or Audible ads. Let's go.
Or mattress ads.
Oh, yes. I actually have a mattress from one of those mattress ads that Mike Duncan did.
You know what's also serving us well, Colin?
What?
Debates and discussions and discourses over what it means to be strong. And today, we're going to talk about one of the most pervasive and at the same time, I think, hard to pin down characterizations, tropes, cliches, whatever you want to call it, in media as a whole. In all capital letters, strong female character. And as we will discuss, I think the use of female and not woman is a dead giveaway for what this discussion has as its base and its connotations.
Sure. I'm interested to hear what you say. I was talking to a friend once who told me that anytime she listens to a man use the word female instead of woman, she steers clear. Seems like a decent policy to me.
I think it's a great rule to live by. It's essentializing, and it just feels clinical and detached, or maybe like it's animalistic. We wouldn't say a woman dog, so to speak. We'd feel more comfortable saying a female dog. It's a removing them. It's a dehumanization.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so female, male, they're biological markers, and gender I think is very closely related to gender, but to biology rather, but not completely as we know. Woman and man are the human instantiations of how we are supposed to perform those are assigned sex, right?
It's sociocultural.
Yeah. A woman character. I mean, I think a woman character makes sense, but if I'm hearing a woman character, I'm thinking of like a sentient being, a human, maybe a dwarf or an elf, but I'm not thinking a dog, a cat.
Same here. It's the humanization element. And yet it's strong female character. And that, just the name, has a host of packages. Not all of them, even most of them, I would say, good. But Colin, you and I were talking before we began recording, and you posited what I think are three pretty good distinctions. Strong female character, all caps, versus a woman who is strongly written, versus an interesting woman in a piece of media, be it visual, audio, interactive.
So I think that when we talk about a strong female character, full stop, this implies that the woman character has strength, which we do have to discuss and define. Commonly, strength is seen as a masculine characteristic, although women can be strong as well, but that it's a trait that they have, that they are strong. Whereas you can have weak characters that are very well written, which I think also the term a strong female character, when people talk about strongly written characters, they are lumping them into together, because I think what is commonly meant when we want more strong women characters, that we want multidimensional women characters. We want not simplistic male fantasy type of characters. And you can be weak and not do that. Interesting. I did say this as like a third one. I'm not sure if it really belongs as a third one. A character does not have to be like full front and center or even particularly strong to be used in interesting ways. And I can't think of any examples off the top of my head. Maybe you can, but sometimes characters are used for plot purposes, and that makes them interesting.
For me, when I hear strong female character, when I use it on the rare occasions, it's pejorative, almost mocking the 90s, 2000s badass women characters who were hyper specialized in like a physical realm, oftentimes a soldier, assassin, what say you? But that's where they weren't interesting, and they were not well written. They were not multi-dimensional, complete people in a sense. You didn't want to know more about them.
And to me, agency is the hallmark feature of what defines a strong character. In that, not to say that a strong character, male or woman, can't be influenced by events or influenced by the opinions of others, but ultimately they make decisions for themselves and they are self-motivated. They're going after their goals. They're not just being told, hey, go do this. Whereas a weak character, typically speaking, is acted upon.
Colin, I have a question for you then. In general, transcending gender, looking into roles within a story, does that mean antagonists and villains are oftentimes the more interesting because they often, like discussed in chapter one recap, they have more agency, they do more, whereas heroes often react more.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. Part of the driving mystery when you're playing a game or reading a book is figuring out why the villain is doing what he or she is doing, or to what end, or by what means they're bringing it about. But as humans, we are intrigued by those who do. There's a reason why when you go browse the popular history book section in Barnes and Noble, you get books like The Top 10 Kings of England Who Changed the World. You don't get the top 100 nobody farmers that really kept that civilization afloat. It's because we are intrigued by action. We are drawn to those that get shit done.
What's a common critique of shows or books or movies? Nothing happened.
The only show that is not a critique of is Seinfeld, because that is the point.
So one question I have for you, when we talk about strong female characters, it's often used in a sense of physicality. Why is that?
I think it's mostly we do physicality, particularly when we're talking about video games, because some of the hallmarks of video game gameplay is combat and athletics. For example, the first breakout strong woman character in gaming is Lara Croft, right? Tomb Raider. Does platforming. She's running around all of these mountains, caves. She has 2 guns that she's shooting people with. All of this she can do because she is physically capable. And by having that physical ability to do things, then she does them. Whereas somebody who is not as physically strong, at least looking at from the gameplay perspective, can't. That's not to say that there isn't room for physically weak but mentally strong characters, but we come at it first from a position of physicality because of the demands of game design.
So my question for you, why wouldn't Samus from Metroid have that place of honor as the Forerunner as opposed to Lara Croft? Isn't that about a decade older? I see
I mean,
86, 87.
Yeah, so I'm wrong to say that Lara Croft is the first one. You're absolutely right about Samus. I would say that with Samus, finding out that Samus is a woman is kind of a reward for being really good at the first Metroid, because even in the manual, they call her a he. I believe in Super Metroid, it's a bit more obvious. Also, it's not like Samus until very recently. She's not a very strongly written character because she's not really written at all. She exists in this world and she does shit and she explores and she shoots stuff and she's great for that. But Lara Croft has a personality, has a backstory. What I'm saying is that I think Lara Croft is the first big breakout one for the culture as a whole, not just in video games. You're right that Samus needs to be considered.
I was going to say that you were right about why in the culture, in our cultural memory, Lara Croft has a place that Samus from the Metroid games does not. And it's for the reasons that you talked about just now. So I think you're quite right to place Tomb Raider over Metroid.
Lara Croft is an example of like the physically strong character, doing flips and shit, exploring, spelunking, yada yada. But of course, that's only one measure of strength. Are there other characters that you know of, either in games or otherwise, that is perhaps a weak woman character physically, but mentally very strong?
So we've both seen Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
I have a hot take, Colin, and there's no other takes that come from me but sizzling hot.
Someday you're going to give me a cold take and I'm going to know that hell is frozen over.
So I think the producers, the writers of Game of Thrones, they want, I think, Arya Stark to be seen as one of the quintessential strong female characters. But to me, she's not. She's not interesting. She's poorly written, and I don't think she's strong. To me, the strongest character is Sansa Stark, her sister.
Okay, why don't you explain why you think that Arya isn't strong? And I mean, I can see why you think that Sansa is strong, though I want to hear that as well. Claiming that Arya isn't strong, I think is going to be a tough sell.
I think Arya is a strong female character with the capitalization, me using it as in a mocking sense. I don't think she is a character who is strong, that she is a strong character. She seems almost test tube engineered to play on audience sympathies. The badass assassin who survived, goes across, goes to assassin school, leaves assassin school, comes back, has quips, eventually kills the Night King, the big bad, the antagonist of the series. But to me, she's not vulnerable, does not show weakness. You would never see Arya Stark in Game of Thrones, the TV show, break down like Estelle did in the prologue with Kevin Graham. And I think that Estelle is so strong because she's emotionally vulnerable. Strength comes from a place of weakness. It's like how the fearless men cannot be brave. It's having ties to people, loving, and going out into the world, knowing those ties, those people, whatever, can be broken, and acting, fighting in your own way, whether with swords or with words. And to me, Sansa has gone through so much. She's resilient, she's brave, she's proactive, she's interesting, she's well written. She has a quiet strength about her that is no less real. She is much more similar to Estelle Bright, Sansa Stark, than is Arya Stark, in my opinion.
I can't say that I've given much thought to which one of those two is the most similar, but I do, before I give my take on Arya, I do want to ask, have you read the books?
Of course I have. And fanfic.
Okay, well then, is your opinion only tied to the Arya in the show? Because the Arya that I know from the books is a lot more interesting than that.
Let me say this. Arya in the show has a complete arc. Whether you like it or not, it's a beginning, middle, and end. And I think that makes it easier to judge. Whereas if you go by the books, it's a lot more speculation, whereas we don't quite know how the details will end. I think we have the broad picture from the show, but we can't fit all the puzzle pieces together. We just know what the picture looks like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we can't say that she has a complete arc yet because the series isn't done yet. I was a senior in high school when the last book came out, and I am now 28 years old. I'm not sure that we're ever going to get more. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because in the books, we see a lot more of our characters' mental states, their thought processes, not just seeing their actions. And looking at how Arya reacts when she has to kill somebody for the first time, how she has to change her own self-conception in order to survive. Yes, she comes off as cold, cruel, calculating at times, but all of this is because of the lessons and the traumas that she has gone through, and you see her go through them every step of the way. And that's why I find her really compelling as a character.
How much is this, do you think, just different media of the interiority of books versus what we get in a visual format? And does that mean that strength is different in books compared to movies or television? And is it different too from games, where the choice of the player is so much more impactful, do you think?
I'm not sure how much it changes when we're talking about games, especially because there's so many different genres and standards. But I do think that while we can come to the same conclusions by watching movie/TV or read a book, the expectations that you bring to it are a lot different. And so I think that our scripts for understanding characters when we first meet them changes. For example, when a character appears on the big screen and immediately starts like mowing down orcs, immediately you think this is a strong character because they are performing this huge act of prowess. In a book, all you know is that a guy has appeared on a battlefield and is killing a lot of people. You might not think about it in the same way.
To be honest, Colin, I could not disagree more with that statement.
Okay.
And let me explain why in brief. Appears on the screen, immediately starts killing orcs or mooks or fighting, whatever. It's all just so exterior focused. And I do understand that this is an exterior form of media, but it just shows that they're just doing, they're not feeling. And to me, being strong comes from feeling much more than doing. It's about how one looks at and sees the world and chooses to act anyway. Like Estelle is not strong because she hits her staff.
Yeah.
She is strong because she feels deeply about Joshua, about the world. She wants, and she does be strong and hit stuff. But we understand why she's doing it, and that takes time. whether it's a game or a TV show or a movie, to understand how they see the world and why they do what they do.
I mean, I agree with you. I agree with the final product that the way that we classify people as strong or not will be more about the interior world, the interior mind, which also I think is a lot harder to convey in movies, but easier in books and in games. And I think maybe we should talk about some strategies how. But I'm talking about initial impressions. I'm talking about when you first meet them, your expectation for who they're going to be.
I have a question for you then. I think answering it will get us closer to the topic that we're talking about. Why is it important for women characters to be strong in ways that we place less emphasis on men?
How do you mean?
Well, this episode is about strong women characters.
Yes, though I will point out that about half of our discussion has really been about strong characters.
And I think that strong characters and strong women characters within popular conception and execution are similar, very similar, but not quite the same. Why do we feel the need to say, this is a strong woman character?
I think the reason why we feel the need to say that is because for a long time, particularly in video games, there haven't been a whole lot of them. I think at this point, we're at the point where I don't think it's as notable anymore, but certainly when we were growing up as teenagers, most of the games we played you were a man, period. There was no option. The first couple Pokemon games, for instance, right? In Pokemon Generation 3, given the ability to play as a girl, Pokemon Crystal giving you the ability to play as a girl was kind of revolutionary. It's like, holy shit, I didn't even realize I could do that. So our expectations for what a strong character is for a long time was only men, or very rarely included women. Look at ancient literature when we're talking about the Aeneid, or we're talking about Homer or Apollonius. A lot of these movers and shakers and actors that are really driving the narrative forward are men. There are a couple of strong female characters, particularly in things like the Argonautica, Medea, for instance, but they appear and go. Or you're not even supposed to like them that much. Medea, I don't think is supposed to be somebody that an ancient Greek audience walks away liking, even though she is very strong. So I think that the reason why we point this out is because we haven't had a whole lot of them. And so we're still primed to consider it a bit special that we have a strong female protagonist.
Okay, so and you're saying it's more that and not what makes a strong female character a strong female protagonist or antagonist or character in general is qualitatively not much different than a strong character. Then
I don't think it's qualitatively that different. I mean, there's always going to be a little bit because I think that we expect certain behaviors from men and expect certain behaviors from women. And of course, this can be played around with, but I don't think that it's much of a surprise that when we talk about strong female characters, particularly early on, they're basically women showing male characteristics because we had been primed to think of strength as a masculine thing.
I want to be clear. I want to be clear about one thing. I don't think these early ones are lowercase s. They're actually strong. I am mocking. It's or pejorative. That is this popular conception of you're a badass. You're a top soldier, sniper, assassin, strong female character, all capital. That's how I'm using it. I think it's a one-dimensional.
I want to be clear about how I'm using the term, which is when I say a strong woman character, I mean a woman who is strong. I don't necessarily mean that pejoratively. A strongly written character is different, as we've been talking about. I mean, Macbeth's wife is kind of a strongly written character and a strong woman character, right? She recognizes her role in society, that she cannot get what she wants solely through her own actions. So her own actions are directed towards guiding her husband to achieve the means that she wants. This is a pretty common trope of the woman behind the curtain that we see in texts like Herodotus, Tacitus, and other historians. I do think that Lady Macbeth is a strong character and a strongly written one. I think she's quite interesting, a little bit multidimensional, especially when you see a little bit of the guilt that she's playing, her relationship to God versus her earthly desires, and how she throws religion away to go in with the devil. But I mean, she's notable for being that. Not all Shakespearean women are strong. Most of them are not. Desdemona is not strong.
At least to me, the emphasis on strong feels like a relic of the 90s.
Let's talk about interesting women characters then, if that makes it better for you.
No, and I'm not saying it's bad we're approaching this from the lens of strong female characters because we're engaging directly with the intellectual genealogy of their presentation in video games. And it has been pretty for a long time strong female characters, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So I still haven't we haven't really talked about women who are strong who are not physically strong. I think we tried to get into that and then we kind of got sidetracked. From TV, you watch Parks and Recreation, right?
Yeah, I've seen a fair number of episodes.
So what do you think about Leslie Knope?
I think she's a great character. I don't call her strong because I find the label strong to not be productive.
So what do you call her?
A great character, an interesting character, a well written character, a fun character. It's comedy after all. And I think all of these give better insights into the character and the portrayal and the reception than just strong. Because to me, strong raises more questions than it answers. Whereas if I say she's well written, she's interesting, she's proactive, she's fun, that gives a more complete, a better understanding, a better picture of what she's like.
I mean, I agree with that. Uh, However, I do also think that strength is a trait that you can have or not have as an interesting or well-written character. Leslie Knope, I think, is strong because she's consistently faced with adversity and finds a way to get through it, on her own. Like she's very self-driven. She deals with heartbreak a couple of times in a very mature way. She has an inner strength. There are other characters that are not nearly as strong that are also interesting, like a Tom Haverford, for instance. But I think that I don't want to throw away the word strong as just a pejorative thing. Women can be strong.
Now, what I'm saying is that the gendered connotations of strong female character, these specifically gendered ways in which we are conditioned to think about it as a coherent three-word unit, strong female character, that specifically raises, at least to me, more questions of, okay, in what ways? And that's not bad, because you can say she's emotionally strong, she's crafty, she's resilient, what say you? But it's the beginning of conversation and not more the conclusion, whereas she's interesting or she's well written. To me, is more of an end point, whereas strong is more of a start point.
Okay. Take this into account though. I think that one of the more classic stories in JRPGs is that of the reluctant hero, or somebody who starts off very small, perhaps scared, weak, and then through their trials and tribulations becomes strong, accepts their role, fights for the world, fights their goals, etc. And a character that comes to my mind that's also a woman is Estelle from Tales of Vesperia. Not Estelle Bright, a different Estelle. But you basically save her in the beginning. She's a princess trying to get out of the castle, and you save her, and she has a small quest that she wants to do, but she knows she's not capable of doing it by herself. By the end of the game, she's sacrificing herself a little bit in order to help her country. She's very strongly driven in and of herself. You also get to see the change over time with her character, because I've talked about this on the show before, but the Tales series has the skit system, where as you're wandering around the world, the party members will have conversations with each other, which is incredibly good for world building and character building. This is one of the ways that this series in particular gives you a window into the interior world of that character. So to me, watching Estelle from Tales of Vesperia grow from a weak to a capital STRONG strong woman is a very compelling piece of narrative for me.
I get that. I really do. But it just seems to me that use of the word or the phrase strong female characters was still bound up in early expressions of women in video games that is first meant from a predominantly younger male audience from say the early to mid 90s. Maybe that's just me. Maybe all you listeners out there are thinking, what the fuck is Kevin doing? I don't have these hangups.
Maybe they're completely with you and they're like, man, this Colin dude thinks about things way too simplistically.
Like, maybe we're just quibbling over stuff that is hate has been over for 20 years or more.
Let's return to something that I think is interesting that you've brought up a couple of times, but I think that we need to dig deeper into it, is the role that vulnerability plays in crafting. You can call it a strong woman character, a well-written woman character, or even a well-written character in general. What does vulnerability look like? What's too much? Can somebody be too vulnerable?
Oh, completely. Like, you don't want to say hi to someone and they start telling you the most inner life pains and struggles. I think excessive vulnerability in a video game, it just seems pretty passive to me, if that makes sense. They're like so interior focused, letting the world either pass them by or just act upon them without really having a desire to change it.
I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but they have to be out there, of like when you're playing a JRPG and one of the characters is a coward and that's their shtick the whole game.
Yeah.
And like, if it's used properly, it can still be interesting. But if it's just like, if it's static at the coward level.
Are we conflating that with vulnerability?
Yeah, I am conflating it. And perhaps that I shouldn't. I guess to me, so I'm defining vulnerability as the ability to express emotion openly, whether positive or negative. A coward who like runs away from fights, is in a corner crying, they're vulnerable in the fact that they are showing these negative emotions. They're letting the negative emotions rule them, but they are revealing the negative emotions at the same time.
I would equate, being a coward, taking the Flanderization, taken to the extreme, that just to me feels different than a character who is vulnerable, in which you can be a vulnerable and a coward, but it's not a precondition of one or the other.
I mean, I can definitely see where one can be a coward and not vulnerable from an emotional standpoint if that cowardice is really emotional cowardice. Like I'm thinking Squall from Final Fantasy VIII. His most commonly cited line of dialogue is whatever. And he's detached and refuses to connect with anybody for a good half the game. So that I can see, but I also wouldn't call Squall Leonhardt a coward in any other way other than he's afraid of attachment.
And I'm not saying it's not vulnerability, but I think vulnerability is something deeper, more complex.
So, Kevin, we've talked about a couple of traits here. I think we've spent more time problematizing our categories than actually figuring out what they are. Surprise, surprise. So I want to end this episode by asking you, to you, what makes a well-written female character? What are you looking for in a female character or a woman character when you're starting in an RPG for the first time?
Well, for me, first thing I go for, because I'm a sophisticated person, is looks.
Okay, expand upon this.
To be more serious about this, is there, costume fan service, so to speak?
Mm-hmm.
To me, if there's not, that's an immediate mark in favor. They are not reduced to the physicality. They're not reduced to the gender. They're treated more as people.
Yeah.
As characters. Look at Estelle.
That's something that we haven't even really talked about, is the over-sexualization of female characters, strong or weak.
We'd be here all fucking day. I think it's an issue in JRPGs. It's one of the things I do not like about JRPGs or, light novels, which I happen to read a shit ton of. I don't like it. It's capturing the male gaze, essentially. It's really unfortunate, and it sucks.
Over a certain threshold, I don't like it. So you don't know this character yet, though we've talked about her a bit off camera when Hajimari was coming out. But there's a character that we get introduced to in the Crossbell series, Rishia Mao. And in the Crossbell series, she's an attractive woman, a little bit sexualized, but not over the top. Enough to be pleasing, but not enough to be troublesome. She's a little bit more sexualized in Cold Steel. When you get to Hajimari, like, the characters literally comment on how much bigger her boobs got. Like, they are self-conscious about it. And to me, that's when it's crossing a line, when they are magically giving a lot of these, I would say, very well written and strong female characters, Risha, Ellie, that, yes, are busty, but then they get like literal torpedoes when we get to Cold Steel. It's ridiculous.
It's reductive, it's essentializing, so it's a huge red flag to see those kind of costumes, those kinds of design choices. I look how they interact with the people around them. Are they complex? Do they have flaws? Because there was a time in which a strong female character had essentially no flaws.
Yes.
Or if they did, the kind of flaws he told in an interview. I care too much. I work too hard. Whatever. Estelle Bright has flaws. She's quick to anger, hot headed, does not think all the time like she should, kind of clingy a bit.
Yeah, I mean, Estelle, I think, is one of, I mean, she's the reason why we're doing this fucking episode, but she is like
Yes.
the showcase for one of the most multidimensional, realistic people in video games. At least in this first trilogy. We don't really see much more development after this, unfortunately, but she is a model for video game writers, period.
Like, not to belabor the point, we won't talk about this that much, but her scene on the airliner with Kevin Graham, it's great because she's allowing herself to be vulnerable and she's not weaker for it, but she is as strong as she was. She is strong because it is also who she is. She cares a lot.
Yes. I mean, plus she was just hurt. If she did not respond in that way to the traumatic event that had just happened to her, then I would say that something is wrong. Because then we're running into Estelle is the strong female character, therefore she must be perfect and not show any emotion because emotion is weakness. Falcom knows that's not true. And by making her more realistic, therefore she's more sympathetic. And then we're rooting for her as she crawls herself out of this, or drags herself out of this pit of despair that she's been cast into.
I could not agree more.
When I'm looking at female characters or women characters, I tend to agree with you. Less fan art is nice. Less in-game ogling is nice. I don't mind it. I don't mind it completely. I'm a man. The male gaze is intended to work on people like me. However, what is more important to me is their multidimensionality. You know, I need to see them have more to themselves other than this is the role I play and I'm a woman. I need to see them form relationships with other characters that are believable. And I need to see them driven. I need to see them be, at least in part, in charge of their own fate and making decisions for themselves as opposed to just being told what to do.
You need to see them be human as a part of, alongside with them being women. It's not this dichotomy that we've seen for so long of being all it means to be a human is somehow separate from being a strong female character. And that's such a 2002 way of looking at things.
I'm going to be curious to see if the conversation changes over the next decade because, you know, people don't talk about strong male characters. They talk about strong characters. And by that, they assume for a long time it meant male. And now it's starting to include everybody. But as you point out, we do have this category of the strong female character that still gets special mention. And yet I would say that about half the time that we were talking about this, we were looking for abstract traits. We were looking for strong people. We were looking for more believable human beings, irrespective of their gender or sex. And I'm wondering if that's going to become more and more common and that we're going to get rid of the strong woman character archetype and just have the strong character again.
I think we're going to get rid of or finish burying the strong female character archetype as the term has been known for a couple decades now, and instead focus, on the other hand, on women characters who are strong. What makes them strong, not a predetermined almost package of here's the generic traits of a strong female character, more here are the possible expressions of strength in a variety of formats as befits the situation. I think we should end with the question to the listeners of what are some women characters from JRPGs and video games as a whole that are really memorable to you, that have stuck with you positively or not?
You know, I'll answer that question for myself. I think that the first strong female character trademark that I can think of that I experienced in my life was Lynn from the first Fire Emblem game that we got in the West. You really connect with her as a player because she's talking directly to you. And especially in the first 10 chapters of that game, you were seeing her learn about her past, form these strong connections with her party members, and then march across the land of Elib in order to get what is hers and bring justice back to Castle Caelin. It really made an impression on me of how characters can be agency driven. I didn't think about this at the time, but I think it's one of the reasons why I was attracted to her. And of course, she's aesthetically pleasing as well. But that was really like secondhand or a second order concern for me when I was a kid.
That's really interesting. And that is quite a while ago.
Yeah. I mean, I must have been 8. No. I was in Jacksonville. So I was probably like 10 or 11 when I was playing that.
To me, the most memorable is Edelgard von Hraesvelg from Fire Emblem Three Houses.
So both of our examples are from Fire Emblem.
She's stereotypically, and on 3 to 4 routes, the villain, the Red Emperor that we are so accustomed to in Fire Emblem. But on the Black Eagle's Crimson Flower route, we get this interiority, this vulnerability to her. She was experimented on by those who slither in the dark, and she wants to lead this righteous crusade against the oppressive power structures to ensure that no one suffers like she did, to remove this stranglehold of this theocratic, absolutist church that is strangling Fodlan. We get to see in her route that she's a dork leading a bunch of theater kids into a revolution. She's not just this villain or this well-intentioned extremist, but someone who likes sweets, can swing an axe, and just incredibly well-written, well-acted, and a lot is reliant on the subversion of the expected Fire Emblem tropes. And I think it's absolutely brilliant narrative.
We should probably end it here. We should first acknowledge that we put out a poll of everybody's favorite Trails protagonists of the completed arcs. I will note that we put it up before we announced it, which I thought was interesting. But, we have some responses. And overwhelmingly, people like Estelle. Lloyd has a couple of votes, mine included, but Kevin got none. Reen got none. And it doesn't surprise me that Reen got none. It does surprise me that Kevin got none, because I really like Kevin.
10 total. It is 8-2.
Yes. And clearly, with the sample size of 10, I'm fairly certain this is a well-run poll, very representative of the Trails fan base.
I mean, I think it's fair to not include, say, Van, because we don't know how his arc will end.
No, we don't. But I will say, at least from my experience playing Van, he has skyrocketed to the top of my rankings. I don't know if he's the top, but he's in the running. Like, he's fucking excellent.
Next week, we got Chapter 2 of Trails in the Sky, SC. I'm Kevin. That's Colin. See you next time.
Thanks for listening, guys. Have a good night.